Thank you for tuning in to the Field Report. We're going to talk about human trafficking. These are some of the images from the Blue Campaign. That is a program through ICE, and we can go into more about what human trafficking is. I think a lot of us may have seen that the conditions are perfect in every situation, and any American or anyone in the world can be a victim of modern day slavery. It can happen in your home, and it can happen in your neighborhood. It can happen anywhere. I can honestly say that there's a whole new outlook on human trafficking. It's a violation, number one, obviously, of human rights. The conditions are perfect when you're coming from a abusive background, home, family. There's all kinds of wide ranges of conditions that can lead to endangering a person. Okay, it doesn't have to be a young person either. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. So if the conditions are right in your neighborhood, or the lack of awareness, it usually is a result of people misunderstanding what human trafficking is. They're all forms. Of course, the big one, is where victims are forced to sell sex. I don't know about you, but a lot of us have been approached to have, quote, forced sex or some kind of relationship outside of what is normal. Here's some interesting posts. Found this from random Ryan's Rants, and just the subliminal messages regarding sex, and the conditions, of course, is that the sexualization of our society from our young people on up, it can happen to anyone. That's why I think it's such an important topic. A lot of people might not look at themselves as, quote, a victim, but they might be aware that they've been used or coerced or talked into something, okay? Now, it's usually sexual exploitation, but we can make a real argument that in our homes, in our neighborhoods, especially foster children, there's some kind of odd demand on people's lives where typically they should be at school working, they should be within their age group. If your friends or somebody is not with your group, and you're wondering what's going on at home, usually you can look at certain signs. It was really hard for me to wrap my head around this, but at 14 years old, I had what I thought a normal life, until if you look at the conditions in my own personal life, that we were walking into a trap. And really, I think what made this whole topic for me crystallize is that we were very much put in situations with people that, number one, had no interest or in our safety, had no interest in getting us home safely. You're looking at family. You could look at friends. They might not even be aware that they're part of the problem. The lack of awareness is the problem. If we don't understand that anyone can be a victim of human trafficking, anyone. What made it hard for me is that I grew up in a foster home environment where I knew there were some safety concerns. And now as an adult, I recognize the situations I was put in personally. Because of foster care placement and all the other problems associated with it. So I look at all the other factors. Again, this could happen to anybody, but in my case, in the case of a lot of people, we were talked into a lot of things too. We didn't have the verbal skills to say no. We didn't have people around us that were supportive and safe for us, okay? So the conditions were perfect for human trafficking. And if you want to hear more about my personal experience, I did an elaborate video about confronting the pedophile and the people that were responsible for putting us in the danger that we were in. Luckily for us, we went to court, and we had a few really good caseworkers that really walked with us. But no one at the time knew that they could actually put a label to it called human trafficking. But it could happen in your workplace. It could happen walking down the street. We had many, many offers where people in law enforcement had asked me personally if we would do favors for them. So it happened and of course, growing up in Pittsburgh, and you'd think, okay, I used to think it mattered that I came from a family that had law enforcement ties, but it did not matter. I thought it mattered that when we were in foster home that we were safe, but that did not matter. We still had abusive people in our life, so it's almost hard to avoid it. It could happen in your school district. It could happen, and it's typically people who have power and influence, and usually you wouldn't even know that you could be a victim of child trafficking or human trafficking. No way did I think ever in my mind until the whole issue of Pizzagate came out that we were really, really victims of this. And while I did know, of course, because it was obvious, the signs were everywhere. The neglect, the abuse, all the problems that came with being led into foster care. It was obvious. The signs were everywhere. The signs are still everywhere. When your family or somebody is associated with, they do not have your best interests in mind. These are a lot of conditions that lead to abuse. A lot of people who are assaulted at home or assaulted by family are left in a unbearable situation where they're not getting properly cared for or treated, or somebody's not feeling good. All these things play into this. It's about power and control. That is one of the identifiers here. If somebody does not have your best interests in mind and the conditions are perfect, they are, to me, a part of the problem. Part of the problem means that they're not either aware, they're not considering all the other facts, and alienating and abusing somebody is the object. They want to alienate somebody, and there are a lot of families that engage in this. So I believe that they make the conditions perfect for the lack of awareness, because obviously and they might not even be aware of it. That's the truth. They might not even see themselves as a part of the problem. I think because there's such an open activism publicly about this issue, that the more you talk about it, the more you'll realize that all of us may have experienced it or been on one side of this issue where we realize that, oh my gosh, I did not realize that that was human trafficking, that that was a form of slavery. Slavery, to me, has a lot of different, most people think of slavery. They don't think of somebody publicly wearing chains. But to me, it is a form of bondage. You could come home and somebody in your home is engaging in some kind of, sexual fantasy or pornography. One of the things is the indicators is looking into your history, looking at if there's videos of anyone that they're performing sex acts. That was one of the hard ones for me in 2010, but I was outraged enough and I started to learn more about this issue. Now, I didn't identify a lot of the things, but I do know this, that domestic violence and all kinds of forms of abuse can be associated with it. So to me, it's a very broad topic. Okay, so I went into more about the Blue campaign because I think it's so more important. It could happen, again, at the restaurants you work at. It could happen at salons. It could happen, there's been obvious indicators where somebody has either been coerced or forced into a situation where they're being abused or highly mistreated. And like I said, there's a lot of people, they assume that they're not a part of it. That is the lack of awareness. Some people are involved and don't even know they're being involved. That's kind of like the sad reality. They don't look at themselves as a part of the problem. And I think you're either on one side of this issue or not. You're either aware of what's really going on and articulate what's happening, or you're subject to, this, I want to say, gray area. And usually people who are aware of human trafficking, they're not going to knowingly go along with it. They're not going to knowingly allow others to support or engage in it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and point fingers, but I can see there's obvious signs in all of our lives. At some point or another, we've confronted it. We were working, I was headed to work one day, and this was in 2000, and this guy pulls up at the bus stop and he is masturbating in front of us. To me, that's an obvious sign of of somebody that's trying to solicit sex. Again, I gave another example of walking down the street. I lived in a neighborhood, urban housing neighborhood, where the police would regularly talk to girls and out of character would ask for sex. So it's not as if it doesn't happen. It's not as if I've seen people get girls drunk, including people like myself when I was younger, and they would solicit or try to perform sex acts. So to me, it goes to the other thing or the other extreme where your friends or you think you're innocently going out and, maybe in some cases girls go to what they call amateur night and they don't know that they're getting themselves into it. And then something happens in that clubhouse. Another situation, I could give several situations where somebody sexually assaults somebody in a parking lot. There's all kinds of things that are going on either in the workplace or even in strip clubs, sex clubs. People don't look at the sex industry as a form of sex slavery, but a lot of people that go into the strip clubs knowingly know that there's sexual activity, consenting adults. What they don't listen to, and a lot of what is lacking as far as the district attorney's office, is that you cannot rape somebody in a parking lot. Okay? And they say that people are willing participants, but nowhere does it say it's legal to rape and molest somebody or assault somebody in the parking lot, whether it be at a strip club, a restaurant, or in your home or in your neighborhood. And some people, I've heard so many interesting situations regarding this topic. So I think this whole issue about human trafficking, there's so many layers of it. For us, to me, it's awareness. It's preventing it now from this point on in our life. Because you've already know the signs, because you've been subjected to it or you've been victimized by it, or people that are still behaving this way or talking to somebody in a way that is totally inappropriate. You can see, again, the obvious signs of sexual abuse. To me, it's everywhere. So you cannot argue that this doesn't go on. Strangely enough, there are people that will still say, well, how do you know you've really been a victim? I think you can pretty much tell that you've ever been talked into something or somebody's ever mistreated you, left you in a dangerous situation. That, to me, those are the conditions are ripe for being assaulted or attacked or even abused. I've heard of a lot of different situations. So, there are many scenarios I can think of when I look at the issue of human trafficking. I waited tables and always having to make everyone happy. That's not the same thing, but at the same time, there are situations to me that really identify what's going on. So you can look at what's going on in your home, your relatives, your family, your community. All these things play a factor in how you're mistreating somebody. Again, human trafficking, human slavery is a human right violation. And thankfully for people that are activists who pay attention or people who are aware of human trafficking, they're identifying that there are problems. And in a lot of cases now, we're seeing the most extreme forms of human trafficking where they're actually trafficking them, leaving them in the most horrendous ordeal situations. To me, the conditions were right in the 90s, and no one would have really identified that it was human trafficking, but that was very much what was happening. That was very much the conditions. And there was a lot of innocent people that didn't even know they were walking right into a trap. So it's obvious that nowadays with the internet, and that was in the 90s, now look, it just exploded because of the internet. And we're seeing all kinds of obvious signs of human trafficking. So it's for us to get educated and aware of what role you might be playing, whether you're aware of it or not, and your awareness, because to me, it's ignorant now to be not aware of the issues of human trafficking and child sex slavery. Look at all the domestic violence shelters nowadays. That is where a lot of the problems you see, where people have been victims of sexual abuse, domestic violence. No man should ever lay a hand on a woman or even recruit anybody in their family to continue with the cycle of abuse. So to me, everyone has a chance and opportunity to discuss domestic violence because, again, it's all to me in the same umbrella because child abuse, child sex trafficking, people in poverty are most susceptible. People that are weaker people are more susceptible. So you can identify even people who might not even be aware that they're coerced or, in a situation. To me, this is a perfect opportunity for people to be more aware of what's going on in your schools, neighborhoods. Again, teachers and people in authority are now more suspect to be engaging in some form of sexual abuse or human trafficking. That's why I think it's if you start somewhere with these people and you say, listen, you're either not aware of it, you're not identifying what's going on, but the conditions are perfect for a situation which involves human trafficking. Because it's so subtle and it's not obvious because people can hide child pornography, they can hide pornography of all forms. But to me, we always looked at pornography as being a stepping stone to other things. It's kind of like what they say about drugs. There's a gateway drug, and one thing leads to another. Some people say, "Well, weren't really aware." I'd say that most people really don't or knowingly know that something like that's going on. But if they are, and they're not aware of it, then part of the problem is they're either not taking the initiative to pay attention or they're not even looking at some of the other conditions. To me, once you've been exploited or assaulted, to me, it never leaves you. That's been my experience personally. And the reason we're stronger and wiser does not mean we're not as vulnerable. We're not vulnerable. I know a lot of people say, "Well, you're strong, and you're this, and you're that." That is not okay. That still doesn't justify what happened. So to me, I think it's so important for people to be activists and open and share this because there's a difference when you're in a relationship with somebody. You know the difference when it's a loving, caring relationship and somebody cares about you. That applies to your family, that applies to your church, that applies to your work. But there's signs when people are abusing somebody at work, and there's signs when people are abusing somebody at their home, and it could be at any age. When they have become to the point where they're putting you in danger or they're putting your safety in danger, the conditions are right for human trafficking and human slavery. And to me, it's an ultimate violation of human rights. And to me, I think it's more prevalent, more obvious now because people are now looking at themselves and more people are victims and not even aware of it. So to me, we're not going to raise a bunch of victims. We're going to raise more activists, people more aware, people that are going to pay closer attention to these issues. I say remain public about it. There's a lot of great, fantastic people that are now, they're more empowered, they're more aware. And in a world where they don't want to empower the individual, to me, it's that much more important. Identify the people in your life that might have led you down this road or left you in a situation that, number one, endangered your safety. And again, this can happen to children and it can happen to adults. Unfortunately now, those people, you do not have to be in a relationship with them. You do not have to discuss the thing. If they put you in that kind of danger to begin with, then it's good to finally put an end to those relationships. I see that there are people in our community, they do not want to be identified with this, but the problem is if they're relatives or if they're family relationships and they're not paying attention, they may be involved in human trafficking and they might not even be aware of it. And that's the sad reality because it's so real, because it's happening so often and there's so many different situations. It's up to the public to be informed. Because nowadays, ICE is cracking down, thank God, because there are people that are saying enough's enough. You're not going to continue to abuse or assault somebody, whether it be in public or in private. I find this a very important topic. It's about empowering the individual and not leaving people in a situation where they could be assaulted or abused. Again, domestic violence, there's all forms of human trafficking. So I think it's so important nowadays to be more aware. And to me, A public that lacks awareness or pays attention, they're very much part of the problem. Thank you. and find out from somebody that they robbed you because you went online and did a search. The one that I've seen that's the best person to look into gold or an exchange is stevequail.com. I would not recommend just going in there ordering. You send your money and then you probably won't end up with anything. And I've heard a lot of scams about the gold and silver industry. That's it for me, because I think it's really important that we got started somewhere. And it's just where we're at. I can't imagine anything more important than being faithful and true to the Lord, because He's going to bless you. He's going to bless you with good health. The more you draw closer, the better you're going to get, the better healthy you're going to be mentally. And most likely, any of the health issues will eventually just go. In fact, if the whole point about all this was to seek God for healing, bills paid, things like that, God will always supply every need. He does. And that's because we trust in Him. He has supplied every need. He has supplied every area where some of us needed it, and we weren't faithful either. It just shows you how God is faithful even to the people who didn't even deserve it. That's called grace. A lot of us need grace, including myself, a lot of it. Not one of us ended up here because things were going well. We ended up on our knees because things were so bad, and it was mostly because of choices we made. So know that that is the whole point of repentance and prayer. You start there, it's always gonna work out.